anyone notice this? I feel like I'm taking crazy pills!
Okay, so this is going to be a bit of a triple threat kind of video. I'm going to go through supposed major plot holes with Holdo, Daisy, and Leia. Of course, we all know what the issue is with Leia. Leia goes into space. The issue is, how could she possibly survive in space? This is a violation of canon, and etc., etc. Okay, first of all, no, it's not. There's an episode in the animated series where Canon is thrown out into space by Darth Maul. He survives in space for a while, and he's able to use his force powers to get back in. It's also a fallacy that you can't survive in space. You can actually breathe in space for a little bit, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, 40 seconds. So you can do it. Presumably that's enough time to, activate your force powers and get back to the Radis, so there's no big problem. But then you would say, okay, but how did Leia get trained in the Force? And this is, again, Mauler's issue. Like, you need to be trained in the Force. Well, no, you don't, because Anakin, without any explicit training in the Force, was able to survive the pod race, and he was able to blow up a spaceship. And we know what happened. He just relied upon his instincts, subconsciously tapped into the Force powers, and that's it. So you don't need to use the Force even at a conscious level, much less with explicit training. But let's presuppose his point. You need training. Well, she had some Force powers in the original film, in Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. So you have to make this insane argument that over 30 years, she didn't spare any time, like just a couple of hours every year to play with her Force powers. If she did, she presumably knows enough Force abilities to get back to the Radis. But I will note he didn't picked up on one plot hole, but apparently this is the weird thing with him. He doesn't really know anything. Like, she's cold when they bring her back. However, in space, you're not super cold. So here's one of those weird things where he seems to not know enough physics. But if he did, he could be like, well, Rian Johnson did have a plot hole. Like, it's not her surviving, but she shouldn't be that cold. But he doesn't know physics, and he doesn't know, real science, so he doesn't know, he can't use that. But I picked up on that, so I'm glad he alerted me to that plot hole. So there is a plot hole. It's not huge, but it is kind of just a stylistic issue. So Rian doesn't know that much science either. So, but then the problem becomes, well, you both don't know what you're talking about. So there you go. Another thing is that, there's a sequence when Rey is swimming, and people are like laughing, like, oh my God, Rian, he doesn't even pay attention to The Force Awakens. Like, how could she be, like, right, because Jakku is a desert planet. So how could she possibly know how to swim? Now, first of all, she's not swimming like an Olympic swimmer. So, I mean, the thing is, it seems like these are ad hominem arguments. Like, you don't like Daisy, so you're going to find any single piece of evidence, no matter how contrived, to attack. But let's take that and flip it. Because we've seen Daisy on beaches, and she's been in a bikini. Presumably, she knows how to swim, so Rey should know how to swim. If we're using that ridiculous logic, then yeah, Rey knows how to swim. But even if let's go full bore on it, listen, just because you're on a desert does not mean you don't encounter water. It's perfectly possible to be on a desert planet and have tons of lakes. And people say, well, that's kind of implausible. No, it's not. In China, there are huge deserts that have lakes. So presumably she occasionally swam, and that's it. There's no plot hole. But let me get right to the biggest, most supposedly egregious which is Holdo, right? So let's set it up. And I would admit there's a bit of a plot contrivance because Leia uses the Force powers to get back in, and then she's knocked out. Now I think that's actually pretty clever in his writing, because obviously if she was still conscious, then Luke might reach out to her, or she might reach out to him. So that would cause a major issue, like why isn't Luke immediately trying to help her? But she's been knocked out, so that takes care of that issue. But then, of course, conveniently now Holdo takes over. And here we have the infamous issue, like, well, wait a minute, why is Holdo so hostile to Poe? Well, again, and I admit, this is probably the weakest part of The Last Jedi. This is genuinely a difficult issue. It's not a plot hole, but it is a difficult issue. So what is the best argument I can mount? Well, there's a couple of things. One, Poe, again, he violated a direct order from Leia, so he's been demoted. She knows this, so she's going to be suspicious. Two, there's good reason to believe there's moles on board the ship. So how does she know Poe isn't a mole? Three, he's been proven to be very hot-headed and reckless. So if she gave him the plan, he might divulge it, and that might endanger the plan. So there we go. And then there's this fourth, and I admit this is a very difficult one, which is that she's his superior. She doesn't have to tell him anything. She's under no obligation to tell him any information at all. She doesn't have to do that. And again, it's like Daisy. People are just going ad hominem saying, well, look, she just looks weird. Like, no military officer looks like this. First of all, Rian did not make up Holdo. Holdo is a canon character. He didn't invent Holdo. He's just using the character, but the character already existed before he came on board. So again, we have to be careful that he's creating this weird feminist. No, Holdo is a character before he ever did Star Wars. So you have to be a little careful, like, you know, they had this conspiracy to create Holdo. As far as like why she's dressed like this, people in the Resistance are dressed like that. Organa is dressed in a civilian clothes. Like, not everyone is dressed in military gear. I mean, Han Solo, for God's sakes, wears a jacket. He's not wearing like this bulletproof jacket. He's just wearing an ordinary jacket. People wear ordinary clothing in the Resistance. He even does this in The Force Awakens. Nobody's saying, oh my God, that's a plot hole. Why doesn't he have on a ton of armor? Like, yeah, it's a fantasy, you idiots. Like, people point out with Rey, well, you know, in the throne room, like, at one point, a dagger disappears. It's a fantasy. It's not meant to be realistic. I mean, your argument would have to be this, that before Star Wars was realistic, and then Rian Johnson ruined it with his fantasy elements. But fantasy elements were always in Star Wars, so nothing has been proven. You'd have to prove that editing mistake, which is real. The dagger disappears. That ruins the whole sequence. That's not seeing the sequences at all. Like, listen, Darth Maul does a bunch of flips and kicks. He doesn't have to do that. Like, why is he doing that? It's a dramatic performance. It's the same thing referring to the Sith. Like, Anakin is doing all these spins. Obi-Wan is doing all these spins. He doesn't have to do that. Why is he spinning, spinning, spinning? It's a dramatic performance. That doesn't make it a terrible performance. It just means that, you know, Star Wars, again, over and over again, especially with lightsaber duels, favors drama. It doesn't favor, quote, rigor. Like, some people like Shaw Diversity try to really argue this, but it's like, you don't know anything about film. Like, why would the camera be even following them? I mean, if it was a real fight, you know, who the hell's taping this? Like, obviously, it's all dramatically set up. It's all choreographed. Now, you can make the argument like, well, I prefer an Ong Lee film where the actors really do real fighting. That's fine. But that's Ong Lee. That's certain classes of Chinese cinema. What you're saying is then that, you know, Ryan's already doing a lot of homage to Japanese cinema. He should go all the way and have more stuff like China. Well, okay, fine. That's an argument. But what if he's not interested in that genre? You haven't proven anything. So whether we look at Holdo, Rey, or Leia, like, listen, this is all in canon. You may not like it. There are minor plot problems, like the missing dagger, or, you know, how conveniently Leia gets knocked out. But these are not lethal to the plot. You'd have to show some, like, amazingly big plot hole that really proves your case. That really proves objectively this is the worst thing of all time. But Callum, as Mauler is really called, you could just say, listen, let's follow your own tactic. You're a fat, ugly, stupid moron. And I'm just going to keep repeating that in snide variations, and that proves you're objectively a stupid, fat idiot. But here's the problem. You are a stupid, fat idiot. You don't know physics. You don't know the Force. You don't know the Sith. You don't know fuel. You don't know the canon. You don't know the prequels. You don't know the sequels. You don't know the OT. You literally don't know what you're talking about. So when I call you a fat idiot, that's not an ad hominem. You are a fat idiot. You don't know what you're talking about. The objection is like, oh, comrades, how is Rey swimming? Oh, comrades, we have finally caught them in... Like, yeah, you could be on a desert and learn how to swim. Like that. Like, deserts, by definition, do not lack water or rain. They just have not huge amounts of them. That's it. It's not like water magically has disappeared. Just like with space, oxygen does not magically go away. Neither does heat. It's there. It's just not like it's on the ground. It's like, this is just so obvious. That's why I have to start off with my gut to, like, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. Oh, he's off with this guy. I'm taking crazy pills. Like, are you really this stupid? You can't even be this dumb. It's like you're just not seeing things because you don't want to see it. So there's a lot of problems with the editing errors and all that kind of, but they're your errors. Like, your errors of editing are way worse than Ryan's. Like, you're literally inserting things into the narrative that are not there. They're demonstrably false. Like you're seeing plot holes that don't exist. Like, not every scene has these issues. Not every scene has these questions. Like, you could really go through this and say, well, why is Holdo's hair this color? You haven't given us a line of dialogue to explicitly explain this. And you're like, why would Ryan have to do that? Why would any writer, like, well, you haven't explained Holdo's hair color, so therefore that's a plot hole. Now we have 10,000 plot holes. Yeah, well, yes, according to your system, according to this, objectively, The Last Jedi has 1 billion plot holes, but by this standard, Transformers has 1 trillion plot holes. You haven't done a single video on Transformers, so you're like, what is your skill? What is the, like, you can't be this fucking stupid. I feel like, Either you're not really paying attention, which is probably the case, or you don't want to pay attention, which is more likely. You just don't care. You're like, listen, I already come in with hostile intentions. I'm going to find confirming evidence, and that's it. Any attempt to refute him is pointless because he's just going to keep hammering down on his examples, even when the examples are literally in his own head. So it's like, okay, but listen, when you have a good argument, I'll go through it. But it doesn't seem like you do have a good argument. Like, the biggest thing I seem to find here is the wonkiness of the space physics. And I'll go through that. And that's a legitimate point because there's a chase sequence. But, again, it's Star Wars. Unless you're really angry at how Lucas does this stuff, too, then, yeah, you have a point. But he doesn't. He has a complete double standard. Whatever Lucas does, which is kind of weird with the prequels, oh, okay, that's okay. What about the OT? Oh, that's fine. So only The Last Jedi? Really? That's completely hypocritical. That is a complete amount of hypocrisy on your part that you're not willing to be consistent. If you think this is bad Star Wars, all Star Wars films are bad. This kind of issue occurs in all Star Wars, where the science fiction is not very rigorous. Okay, well, that I've done, I think, my good task of being at least a little bit fair. So this has been Star Wars Analyzed, looking at some final alleged plot holes with Rey, Holdo, and Leia. I'm going to finish up with part 2 and 3 of Maulers Critique and do a couple of more things on him. But I think I've been pretty thorough so far. So this has been Star Wars Analyzed, another critique of Mauler's alleged plot holes with Rey, Leia, and Holdo. Thanks for listening. If you like the content, please like or subscribe and hit the link below. Thanks for listening. Star Wars Analyzed.